Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us again Tom Stefaniak, who's a certified financial planner and president of Pinnacle Wealth Management. Tom, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, I love the series that we're doing on preparing for retirement. And today we want to cover some really important points on managing life's transitions. It kind of reminds me of in business, you think about the word pivot, and a pivot doesn't mean stop doing what you're doing and make a U-turn. It just means like, oh, you know what? Let's notice this point in our business and let's make a slight shift. Well, maybe in planning for retirement, there's some life's transitions that people will go through. And if they're aware on the front end, then they can be better prepared financially. So what are some of these transitions that you see your people and your clients going through in your practice?
Great question, Mike. And normally you go through life and it's pretty steady course, isn't it? Right? You have these plans that you're going to be going through, and you have little bumps on the road and you kind of deal with them, the pivots you talked about. And these planned things like, okay, I'm going to send my kid to college someday or take care of my grandkids' college or my own retirement. Those are the big planned things. I think today's conversation, we should probably talk about those unplanned things.
Yeah.
Right? Those things you don't expect, that you don't plan for, but all of a sudden, wham, it hits you unexpectedly, and you're in a daze and you're trying to figure out, where do I go next? And that's, I think, what we're going to be talking about today is those weird things that come along that you don't see very often.
Agreed. And, it as you were describing that, it reminds me of this graphic that you probably have seen on Facebook or social media, where it's this picture of this line and it says, this is the typical line to success. And it goes from left to right, straight up in a nice straight arrow. And that's what people think when I launch a business or plan my life or plan my retirement. It's just, how smooth sailing. But in reality, the next picture is all these squigglies. Now, going in circles and backwards and up and down, and you end up getting to the same place pretty much, but in between the beginning and the end, there's a lot of hurdles, bumps, like you're saying, these transitions. So you're exactly right. And I feel like if people can realize personally, professionally, life, business, in whatever context, these things will happen, and that's normal. So now if you know some of the things to watch for, these transitions, wow, now you feel like, okay, I knew that kind of thing might happen. Now I've got some responses and some ways to move through it.
Exactly. And the first one that we see while in your working years is the unexpected loss of a job.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that quite a bit even in the last year or two, right?
Yeah.
In this kind of crazy world that we've been through itself. And you're going along fine and you're saving, and all of a sudden you lose your job. And that's the unexpected part. So what do you do? And we've actually experienced this with several of our clients in the last year, where they thought everything was going well, and all of a sudden, boom, they don't have a paycheck. All right, what do we do? They end up calling us first and say, okay, what should we do? It's like, well, good news is we set aside a cash reserve for you in case of an emergency goes along. And they're going to have questions about their health insurance. Do they take the health insurance or not? Or what do I do with my old 401k? And they have all these questions that popping up, and never mind the emotion and just the sheer shock of, oh my God, I lost my job. How am I going to buy groceries next month? Kind of stuff. And dealing with those life transitions and helping people understand, we kind of did plan for these things. You didn't know I was planning for these, but I was planning, because these weird things do come along.
Yeah.
We have to make sure we have a reserve. We have to make sure that we've paid down your debts. And so that when this time happens, yes, you're going to survive it financially, but you're also going to have to deal with surviving it emotionally too, right?
That's I just think that's such a massive point. Is you're talking about this specific life transition, an unexpected loss of a job, and of course the natural thing is the financial impact. Like, how do I pay the bills, put food on the table? So having the reserves, having lower debt is super important. But you bring up an important piece too that I know, and I really love and applaud how you work with your clients on this, is the emotional side of things. Like, loss of a job, hey, doesn't mean you're less of a person. It just means that things moved on, things happen. And it could be, actually, this is my opinion, it could be a quote unquote loss of a job because you decided, you know what, I'm going to change careers. I'm going to go back to school and get a different career, or I'm going to start a business and start to slowly transition. So it might be not a loss of a job unexpected. It might be a change of a job. And there still is transition in that.
It's interesting. I literally talked to somebody yesterday who is leaving their career and starting a new business.
Yeah.
And he's both excited and terrified at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, I've saved up the money like you told me to. Okay, I'm taking this step forward. Oh my gosh, I hope this works out. And yes, there's a whole bunch of anxiety with that as you start this new business. And I can appreciate that itself, but having someone to talk to and kind of walk through what you should be doing and how should you be setting that up is, I think, just invaluable.
Yes, because if that person you mentioned that was excited and terrified at the same time did not make the correct financial moves ahead of that, however many months or years ahead of that, then that pressure and anxiety would be 10x'd, because I know I want to do it. I've got that entrepreneurial bug. I want to make that transition, but oh my word, I don't have two nickels to rub together. I can't do that financially, but I still want to do it. Wow. The balance of having your financial picture in order now makes that anxiety like, okay, that's normal. I can work through it because someone has shown me the way. So that's a huge piece, is making sure your finances are ready. And you know what? I even would think this, that person you're talking about, you might have been given the same type of advice. Let's make sure you have this in place and some lower debt. And you might have been given some generic financial advice that's really sound, even in advance of that person thinking, I want to start a business. But then when that topic comes up, you go, hey, you know what? That just validates what we've been working on the last few years, because now look where you are. You're in a position to be able to say, yes, let's start that transition. Whereas if you hadn't been making those moves, it would be very different.
Yeah, it gets a lot scarier.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So what's another transition that people can be exposed to and be prepared for?
And I don't know if you can be prepared for this one, is we talk about divorce, right? When you have a 2-household income and all of a sudden there's a divorce, and now there's 2 households with 1 income each. And again, it's kind of wild that our clients call us, both end up calling up, both spouses would call us up and say, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah.
And it's the shock, obviously, and then you have to deal with the family part of it, and how do we split up the assets? And I can remember this from like 5 or 6 years ago. A couple came to us and they said, the marriage is not going to work. It's going to get divorced. They're going to have to split up the assets. And each one of them separately, they said it a different way, but basically say, am I going to be okay now? Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of some scary and pretty intense conversations to have. And like, how do I say this? I have this love-hate relationship with what I do, because we have these really hard conversations with people about a divorce or other things like we're going to be talking about today. But I love that I've gone through this experience many, many times before. Most people have gone through maybe these life events maybe once or twice in their life, and that's it. We see this a lot. Yeah. So I think we can bring some value to the table of saying, okay, this is where you need to be thinking about. These are the questions you need to ask. These are the things you need to start thinking about. So yes, those first couple of conversations at the part of the start of the divorce is very emotional, and it's trying and it's challenging. But what I also love is those conversations 2 or 3 or 4 years later, where we took those steps, we did the right things, we went through the process, and now you're in a much better spot, and they're much more relaxed and much more going forward.
is like you said, you don't want to feel like I have answers for these life transitions that are painful, because it's like, I hate to have to talk through these, but you know what? We live in a world that is broken and fallen and crazy. And so they're going to come up. So if you can be one of the people that can help guide someone through that, then more power to you. And there are financial decisions that need to be made with these things, with change of a job, loss of a job, with divorce, if and when these things come up. And I think that that's a huge service. It's not just when you retire, you must have X number of dollars. Let's put it in this and let's, watch the markets. Okay, next. There are a lot of financial moves that need to be made so that if and when these things come up, that you're prepared. And maybe divorce is one of them. And you know what? Thank you, Lord. Divorce has not been part of my life, but Tom, thanks for keeping me updated on what if, because I could cross that one off. But this one came up here. And there's going to be those things that come up. So finances really play such a huge role, because if you're prepared, it doesn't eliminate that fear and anxiety. It just lessens it and makes it, a little bit more palatable.
Absolutely true, because it's a scary event going on right now. If you go through a divorce, invariably one of the spouses is the financial person, one is not. And they might not know where all the assets are, where all the liabilities are, and who should we talk to first? Should we be talking to the attorney? Should we be talking to the accountant? And like I said, we've been through this many times before, so at least we can guide them of what steps they should take first, second, and third as they go through that very trying and emotional time.
And you may have worked with one spouse on the specific strategy of saving, investing, eliminating debt, and you're moving down that path for years. And now the other spouse, you have to bring them up to speed because maybe they weren't, for some reason, fully part of the conversations. And so it's those kind of things to say, here's what we've been doing. Here's why we've been doing. Here's the success of this, and making sure that they now are part of that equation. So that's a big point. So let's think about what's another life transition that could come up that someone could be faced with that then has financial implication.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a personal story.
Okay.
And it has to do with a major medical issue. And this has to actually do with, obviously, many clients, but the personal one for me is my mother. She's 94 years old. She has a dementia, so she's in a memory care unit. And so as dealing with this, I'm kind of dealing with both sides of the equation, right? I'm dealing as the advisor, talking to my brothers and sisters and like, oh, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how we're going to pay for it, and here are the things we need to do to make sure that the estate plan's in set. And then I also have to deal with it as the son, too. It's like, this is my mom who's going through all of this stuff and the challenges that she's facing and kind of dealing with that. So it's an interesting twist on this conversation of life transitions, because I'm going through this personally for the last several years.
And you can say, hey, don't worry. You're not going to be doing as I say. You are going to be doing as I do, because let me just tell you, I'm dealing, and I think that makes it so much more genuine and relevant, because your client can say, oh my word, yes, I felt the same way, and I think that really is so helpful. Not that we want to go, let me now go through X transition or Y transition so that I can relate to clients. But when it comes up, you know what, I'm being authentic here, and my mom, and here's what I felt. And here's what we put into place. Here's what we found. And it's like the old sales technique, feel, felt, found. I know how you feel. Other people felt the same way, but here's what they found. Well, you're doing the same thing. And major medical issues could be you. It could be your spouse. It could be your parent, one or both of your parents, and they all have implications on yourself, to deal with. So what are some of the financial aspects that play into then major medical issues?
And you were talking specifically about my mom's situation of like, she was independent. She lived in the house we all grew up in, right? Okay, great. And I don't know if you know this about me, Mike. I'm actually come from a very large family. I'm the 8th of 10 children.
Oh, wow.
So this was a really big house she lived in.
Yeah.
Back in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she was independent. And then as we kind of talk about these medical issues that came up, and she had to leave the house and went to independent living, then assisted living, then a nursing home, and then finally memory care. And as we kind of walk through that, I think I can add some value to my client's conversation. Like, well, this is happening to my mom or dad, and this is where we are on the stage. And I said, well, this is what I saw when I went through this as well. Not only, again, as the advisor, but then also as the son, kind of walking through each one of these stages, that what should you be doing next, and make sure the estate plan is there and we have a durable power of attorney all set up, and make sure the will is completed, and working with the accountant, make sure the taxes get done, and all of those different things that people don't think about.
Yep.
Because they're dealing with the emotional things of helping a parent or a loved one through a very challenging medical experience.
Well, I'm going to I always love making analogies and correlations that validate a point. And it makes me think of, you should not make these dramatic financial decisions in the midst of a dramatic emotional time. Similar to, you probably shouldn't be starving and going to the grocery store shopping for the week's groceries because you're going to go, that looks good. That looks good. Maybe you're not going to buy the most healthy things. So I would ask you, is this an accurate statement? You should work with someone like yourself with these financial strategies well ahead of time, so that when life's transitions come up, you're prepared and you don't need to make these decisions during a highly heightened emotional time, because that might not be the time to make them. You might not be comprehending everything you could, as opposed to well ahead of something where you can think rationally.
Mike, I think you hit it right on the head, and I agree with you 100%. But we also live in the real world, right?
I know. Yeah. It sounds good to say, but is it done in practice? Yeah.
Yeah. Because, yes, we absolutely should do that. But then life gets in the way, because you have family and you have kids and you have your job and your life and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes things fall through the cracks.
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and we've all. So I'll tell you my personal story. When I grew up, my parents taught me, thou shalt not use credit cards and get into debt. And I'm like, yeah, okay, great. And what do? I turn 26, buy a house, and run up credit cards to $30,000. And it's like, I knew better, but I did different. And it was a struggle digging out of that hole. Well, we all know some things in certain areas of our lives we should do, but we don't really do. So maybe when the student is ready, someone that listens to this right here is going to go, okay, I've been putting that, I need to get my financial house in order. I need to make sure that, maybe some of these holes are plugged in the bucket, or some of these things are checked off, so that when life's transitions come up, I'm better prepared. So, we've talked about some of these things like marriage and job change and medical. What's the next step? I feel like the next step past, some major medical could be, hopefully not, but death of spouse and parent. How does that play in?
Hit it right on the head there. That is probably the most emotional of them all, right? Loss of a spouse, be it planned or unplanned because of a long-term illness or something along those lines. That is probably the most challenging part of my career, of sitting down with someone that just lost a spouse unexpectedly. And I can vividly remember this from a few years ago. They were just a few years away from retirement, and he passed away. And the whole plan was they're going to retire in a few years and live out their dreams and travel and do very cool things and all of that. And it didn't work out. And it was sad, and it was emotional, and it was challenging. And we were both crying in the office, quite frankly, because I knew them both very, very well. And she was just kind of lost throughout all of that. And that's hard. Again, this love-hate thing that I have in my career, that I hate that I have to have these conversations, but I
Yeah.
love that I've been through enough of them that I kind of know where to go. And invariably, the spouse calls me first and says, "What do I do?" And I remember that she just brought in a bunch of stuff that she just had.
Yeah. Like a shoebox of, like you take receipts to the accountant at the end of the year. She brings the papers going, what?
Yeah. And she wasn't sure, like, I got this retirement account from her job. And do I do the health insurance? And what do I do with the life insurance? And the attorney is calling me. And what do I do first? And a lot of it is just kind of relax. You're going to be okay. We'll help out. We'll step up. We'll be with you throughout all this. We'll hold your hand. We'll sit down and fill out the paperwork for you right in front of you so that it all gets done itself. Because in this particular case, there was a lot of shock, if you will, and not knowing where to go, and kind of blind eyes looking in the mirror and not knowing what they're seeing, and just challenges of all of that. And at least I think we were able to help her understand what some of this stuff was. And you can actually physically see her body just kind of relax a little bit,
It makes me think of, back in the old days, you'd be a stockbroker and make this stock trade and thank you and have a nice day. And you're like an order taker moving money around. Well, these days, it goes into so much more detail than just knowing how to place a trade and put money in a certain fund. It is these things we're talking about, and it's a gift, in my opinion, that big relief thing there. They couldn't care less they want good rates of return, but they want to make sure that the plan is in place, that and understand fully that you care. And yes, it needs to be a good plan and safe and good returns and all those things, but that should be the minimum requirement. The other aspect is the gift of, I hear you, let's lock arms, arm in arm over your shoulder. We'll get through this. Here's what I've seen. Here's some things to consider. And now they feel like I'm heard.
And they just want to know that they're taken care of, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And different example is, the husband had a terminal illness and cancer and took a couple of years for him to pass. And his whole question was, make sure that my wife's taken care of.
Yep.
Just Tom promised me that she's going to be taken care of. She's going to be taken care of. And walking through that process itself, I think, helped him as he was passing away, helped her as she was grieving through this very long process, making sure that she was going to be okay and that she was going to be taken care of, and that someone would be there for her as we go through this whole process. And no disrespect to her, because she's a brilliant person. She's a genius, quite frankly. But this is not her field, right? She's brilliant in a different field, in a different profession. And this is where I think, as a financial advisor, we can add some tremendous value to help people.
100%. Well, I think we really wrapped up the concept of managing life's transitions. And there's probably some sub bullet points under each one of these that could come up, but these are some of the main ones that I know that people will resonate with and realize that, I need to be prepared. So, Tom, when someone thinks of this or is listening to this conversation, what's the best way that they can reach out, connect with you, and maybe get that feeling of, give me a thumbnail sketch of what I should be doing, and how can I better prepare for some of these transitions that can come up?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. And if you're listening to this and this hits home for you, because if it's your situation, or it's someone that you know and you love and care for, and they're going through one of these very difficult life transitions, we would like to offer to help. You can reach out. Easiest place is go to our website, pinnaclewm.com. And you can take a look at our website, and we have a lot of information about the things we're talking about today. But specifically in the contact tab, you can either find my phone number, or you can go straight to my calendar and just find some time on my calendar to spend a half hour on the phone or on Zoom, or even if you want to do this in person, and just kind of walk me through, hey, listen, I have these questions. And Mike, I talk about this a lot. I like to be the financial answer guy, and hopefully I can be a resource to at least point you in the right direction of saying, hey, this is what the things you should be thinking about.
100%. Well, Tom, your care for your clients and your relationship focus comes through loud and clear. So I encourage anyone listening to reach out, learn more about what Tom can do for you. And Tom, thank you so much for coming back on and talking through these relevant topics.
Truly my pleasure, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.